This wasn't just an act of aggression. It was a ghost strike. No radar, no warning, just impact and silence. A mission carried out in shadows, leaving behind only questions and the sound of disbelief. The kind of operation that makes you wonder not just who did it, but why the world seems so content to move on. You see, when an aircraft vanishes in the middle of the sky, right after an attack, without a trace, without accountability, something deeper is at play. This wasn't just steel and smoke. This was a message, and that message was delivered with precision and cruelty. We can strike, and no one will stop us. Now you tell me, how does a nation absorb such a blow? Its skies violated, its people stunned, and the world just flips the page like it's yesterday's news. Israel stood in shock. The radar screens went blank, the phones lit up, the people asked questions. But outside its borders, a chilling quiet, that silence. It wasn't peace, it was absence, absence of leadership, absence of moral outrage, absence of even the most basic human curiosity. What happened? And why aren't we talking about it? I've been around long enough to know the difference between noise and truth. And when something this calculated happens, and then vanishes into the void, it isn't just a failure of defense. It's a failure of narrative. The world moves fast, headlines change by the hour, but justice doesn't have a deadline, and silence should never be an option when lives are lost and sovereignty is violated. There's a difference between being cautious and being complicit, because here's what they don't want you to think about. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. If an aircraft can attack and vanish without accountability, then we've entered a new era not of warfare, but of erasure, where acts of violence can be committed and scrubbed from memory in real time, where people demand justice and the world replies with, "Nothing. This isn't about politics. It's not about sides. It's about principle." About international laws we all claim to respect, until they become inconvenient. About the promises made at podiums, in treaties, on stages where leaders speak of unity and peace, then go silent when the cost of truth gets too high. You see, silence doesn't just protect the guilty. It isolates the wounded. It tells victims that their suffering is only valid if it fits someone's agenda. And that should scare every one of us. And make no mistake, this was a warning shot heard around the world, whether we admit it or not. A signal that someone out there thinks they can play God in the sky and walk away like nothing happened. If we don't demand answers, then we've accepted a new rule: power over truth, might over law, fear over fact. But I still believe in a different code, the kind where justice means something, where the sky belongs to no one and everyone at the same time, where silence isn't seen as wisdom, but weakness, and where a vanished aircraft isn't just another mystery. It's a call for answers, a call for courage, a call for clarity in a world too comfortable with forgetting, because justice has a voice, and it's waiting for us to use it. A nation stood in disbelief, its skies breached, its people staring at each other with questions no one could answer. One moment there was calm, the next fire and smoke. And then nothing, no claim, no ownership, just the eerie absence of responsibility. Israel was stunned, but what followed was perhaps more disturbing than the attack itself. The world's response, or rather, its refusal to respond. You'd expect a moment like this to command global attention. You'd think leaders would speak out, that journalists would dig in, that headlines would stay hot until truth rose to the surface. But instead, there was an unsettling quiet, a silence so thick, so unnatural, it told you more than words ever could. The world turned away, governments stayed silent, news cycles moved on, and the deeper question echoed: why? Was it fear? Was it politics? Or was it indifference? See, when something this serious happens, A military aircraft strikes, then disappears, and no one demands accountability. We have to look beyond strategy and into soul. What does it say about the moral compass of the international community when an entire nation's security is violated, and the reaction is to shrug, to sidestep, to forget? This silence, this global silence, is not neutral. It speaks, and what it says is dangerous. It says some lives matter more than others. It says sovereignty is conditional. It says truth is negotiable if the right people stay quiet. That silence becomes an accomplice. It protects those who violate borders and bury evidence. It isolates those who suffer, and it sends a message to every nation watching: do what you want, just make sure no one's watching. That silence robs people of closure. It leaves families with questions, not answers. It gives space for lies to grow and for the facts to die. And when that happens, when we allow the facts to die, we don't just lose the story. We lose the lesson. We lose the warning. We lose the chance to stop the next one. But here's the hard truth. Silence isn't just something that happens. It's a choice. Someone chooses not to speak. Someone decides not to investigate. Someone signs off on silence, and in doing so, they rewrite reality. They allow the shadow to win over the light, and for the victims, for the nation attacked, that silence is the second wound, the one that bleeds longer. We've seen this pattern before. A tragedy strikes, the facts start to form, and then politics swallows it whole. Narratives are crafted, agendas take over, and before long, we're not talking about the truth anymore. We're arguing over whose version gets to survive. But this can't be one of those times. We can't let this story fade into the void, because if we do, then we've accepted that injustice only matters when it's convenient, and that should never be acceptable. So yes, Israel was shocked, and rightfully so, but the deeper wound lies in what came next, or what didn't. The world's silence didn't heal, it didn't help it abandon. And if we allow that kind of silence to become normal, we're inviting a future where truth has no defenders and justice has no voice. What happened in the sky that day was an act of violence. But what followed in boardrooms, press rooms, and government halls around the world, that was a failure of conscience, and we still have time to fix it, but only if we speak. The aircraft didn't just disappear from radar. It disappeared from reality. One moment it was there, striking with precision, making its mark in fire and fear. And the next, it was gone, like it had never existed. No official footage, no wreckage, no global statement. It didn't just vanish from the sky, it vanished from the truth. And when something this significant is wiped so cleanly from the global record, the question isn't just what happened. It's who's working so hard to make sure we never find out. See, the problem isn't just the event. It's the erasure. It's the fact that this aircraft, an instrument of violence, attacked, escaped, and then was swallowed by silence. No accountability, no trail, no answers. We've got black boxes for crashes, satellites that track hurricanes, cameras on every corner of every city, and somehow no one saw where this aircraft went, or maybe they did, and chose not to tell us. And that's when truth starts to rot, when the world accepts that not everything deserves to be questioned, when headlines are replaced by distractions, when governments hide behind carefully worded denials and media outlets lose the appetite to push. That's when reality begins to bend, because if no one talks about it, if no one asks where that aircraft went, then eventually people stop caring, and when people stop caring, truth dies quietly. But we can't let that happen. We can't let a mystery this serious be buried beneath the noise of convenience, because the moment we let a disappearance go unexplained, we tell the world that power gets to decide what the truth is, that the facts only matter when they don't make someone uncomfortable, that fear can edit history, and that is not just dangerous, It's devastating. Think about it. A military operation occurs. A strike is delivered. People are hurt. A nation is shaken. But somehow the machine behind it slips through the cracks of time like a ghost. Now ask yourself, how many other ghosts are we living with? How many acts of war, aggression, or cruelty are being rewritten or deleted, while the rest of us are just trying to get through the day? That aircraft may have disappeared from the sky, but the consequences didn't. The fear didn't, the questions didn't, and the silence around it. That didn't bring peace. It brought confusion, doubt, mistrust. It shook the idea that there are rules in this world, that nations can't be struck without cause, that justice has a structure. But when we allow the truth to be erased, when we let the machinery of war operate in shadows, we give up something sacred. We give up the belief that truth always finds its way to the surface. This isn't just about one plane. It's about a pattern, a method, a cold strategy that says if you control the narrative, you control the memory, you control the accountability, and maybe that's the real weapon. Not the aircraft, but the ability to make it vanish. And with it, every scrap of truth we needed to understand what really happened. But we don't have to accept that. We still have a voice. We still have the power to question, to challenge, to demand. And we must. Because when truth vanishes with an aircraft, justice doesn't just stall, it crashes. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was complicity. It was the kind of quiet that echoes louder than any explosion, the kind that settles over the world like a blanket, suffocating every attempt to speak up, to question, to understand. And that silence, it wasn't natural, it was designed, because when a military aircraft strikes and then vanishes, when an entire nation is shaken and the world barely blinks, something larger is at play, something more disturbing than the attack itself. You see, in the moments after the skies cleared, after the smoke faded and the sirens went still, there should have been a reckoning. There should have been global outrage, investigative reports, pressure from allies and enemies alike to uncover the truth. Instead, what we got was nothing. No emergency meetings, no flood of questions, just whispers behind closed doors, and an international community too tired, too timid, or too tangled in politics to speak out. And that's where the moral failure begins, not with the aircraft, not with the attack, but with the reaction, or the lack of it. Because silence in the face of injustice doesn't mean you didn't see it. It means you chose not to speak. And that choice, that's where accountability dies. That's where truth gets left in the rubble, buried under layers of fear, apathy, and diplomacy dressed up as neutrality. We live in a world where narratives are shaped not by facts, but by who's willing to push them, where a tragedy is only as important as the political value it holds. And when a nation like Israel is struck in such a precise, calculated way, and the world looks the other direction, that's not just oversight, that's a message that some attacks are allowed, that some violations get a pass, that the rules don't apply to everyone equally. This kind of silence is dangerous because it sets a precedent. It says that if you're powerful enough, strategic enough, or connected enough, you can commit an act of war and then disappear into the night without consequence. And it leaves other nations wondering, if it can happen to them without justice, what's stopping it from happening to us? That silence becomes a shield for the aggressors and a sentence for the victims. But let me tell you something. Silence does not equal wisdom. It does not equal strategy. It is not maturity or restraint. Sometimes silence is simply surrender. It's the world saying, we know what happened, but we're too afraid to admit it. And when fear replaces truth, when diplomacy replaces justice, when convenience replaces conscience, we all lose. There are moments in history when the world's refusal to speak becomes as damning as the act itself. This is one of those moments. A strike happened, lives were changed, a nation was left reeling, and the rest of the world went quiet, not because they didn't know what happened, but because acknowledging it would mean acting on it. And action has consequences, but so does inaction. We're not talking about whispers in the dark. We're talking about a global silence that has weight. It has power, and it tells every victim, every survivor, every witness, your story doesn't matter unless we decide it does. And that is a betrayal far deeper than any weapon can deliver. Because when silence follows injustice, it doesn't just protect the guilty, it abandons the innocent. We are not just witnesses, we are accountable. Whether we like it or not, whether we admit it or not, the moment that aircraft struck and vanished, it became everyone's responsibility to respond. Not just Israel's, not just military analysts or journalists, all of us, because in the face of a crime that brazen and a silence that deep, being a bystander is no longer neutral. It's a position, and doing nothing is not harmless. It is a choice that echoes far beyond borders. You can't sit in the comfort of your living room, scrolling past headlines, and pretend this doesn't involve you. When truth is attacked, when facts are erased, when lives are threatened, and the world chooses to look away, the danger doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It becomes a signal to every rogue force, every radical power, every silent manipulator that they can do the same, and they'll get away with it, because the world has proven it no longer has the will to confront injustice unless it fits a convenient narrative. See, we talk a lot about justice like it's this abstract, noble thing floating in the sky, but justice only lives if we breathe life into it, if we guard it, speak for it, fight for it, and right now it's on life support. Because what happened in that sky, the strike, the disappearance, the deliberate vanishing of truth, it wasn't just a military maneuver. It was a moral test, a test to see who would stand up and who would stay quiet. And far too many chose quiet. Now, I'm not here to point fingers at any one country or agency. I'm here to tell you the hard truth. Silence is shared. It's collective. Every government that refused to ask questions, every reporter who let the story slip, every citizen who thought, "It's not my problem," they are all part of this silence. And when we fail to demand accountability, we fail each other. This isn't just about defending one nation. It's about defending the principle that no nation, no people, should be struck in the dark and left in the dark. It's about the idea that justice has no borders, and silence in one corner of the world gives permission for injustice in another. Today it's Israel. Tomorrow it could be someone else. The sky doesn't belong to one country. The truth doesn't belong to one media outlet. Accountability doesn't belong to one government. It belongs to all of us. There is no comfort in ignorance anymore. There is no safety in silence. If you see injustice and you say nothing, you are no different than the one who pulled the trigger, because you allowed it to happen again. Maybe not with your hands, but with your absence. And absence has a cost. We are not powerless. We are not voiceless. But we become both the second we choose not to act. We become complicit when we let fear or convenience decide what matters. But if we speak, if we ask the hard questions, if we refuse to look away, then we take our place not just as witnesses, but as defenders of what's right. And that's what the world needs right now, not more silence, not more excuses, but people willing to stand up and say, "We saw it, we know it's wrong, and we will not be part of the silence that follows. When one aircraft falls, the whole sky trembles. This isn't just about a single mission or a single nation." What happened wasn't isolated. It was a ripple across the entire balance of global security. An aircraft attacked, vanished, and left behind more than destruction. It left behind a silence that stretched beyond borders, a silence that told the world, this can happen anywhere. And if we don't treat it with the gravity it deserves, if we don't confront what it truly represents, then we've learned nothing. We've only waited for the next one, because let's be clear, this wasn't just an attack. It was a signal. It told every player on the board that the rules no longer apply, that an aircraft can break into sovereign airspace, deliver devastation, and disappear into the wind without accountability, without explanation, without fear of consequences. And that kind of message doesn't stop at one border. It echoes. It echoes in the war rooms of unstable regimes. It echoes in the strategies of those who traffic in secrecy and chaos. It tells them, if you move fast, strike hard, and leave no trace, you win. That is the world we risk entering. A world where military technology becomes a ghost, where weapons don't just destroy buildings, they erase the truth. Where power isn't about strength, but about how well you can disappear after the damage is done. And if we allow this incident to pass without answers, if we allow the vanishing of this aircraft to become just another unsolved mystery, then we have endorsed a future where silence is more valuable than justice, and shadows speak louder than law. Now I want you to think about something. What keeps our world from falling apart? It's not just treaties, not just diplomacy. It's the belief, shared across nations, that there are rules in place, that war has boundaries, that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the line. But when this aircraft attacked and vanished, and no one answered for it, that belief cracked. And when a crack forms in the sky, it reaches the ground. It shakes people's trust. It makes the next act of aggression easier, and the one after that inevitable. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about drawing lines. It's about deciding whether we still believe in the structure of justice, or if we've surrendered to a future where anything goes. When Israel was struck, they weren't just responding to a breach. They were witnessing the collapse of a standard. And while they asked the world to look, to listen, to respond, they were met with silence. That silence didn't just fail Israel. It failed the idea that the world still operates on shared responsibility. One aircraft, one strike, one disappearance. That's all it took to rattle the foundations of international security. But how we respond, that's what determines whether the tremble ends here or becomes a quake that tears through the future. We can't afford to look away. We can't afford to normalize the idea that violence can operate without evidence, without ownership, without justice. The sky belongs to everyone. And when that sky is violated, when an aircraft becomes a ghost after an act of war, it's not just the air above one nation that's shaken. It's the ground beneath us all. Because in that moment, we're not just watching history, we're rewriting it, and the pen is in the hands of those who dare to speak.